Perfectionism is most simplistically defined as the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. Now, I don't know about you, but I was taught never to use a word in its own definition, so I came up with my own. Nothing is ever good enough. Kind of dismal, right? But anyone who has identified themselves as a perfectionist knows this feeling well. They know what it's like to stare at a blank sheet of paper for 15 minutes because that first sentence just isn't quite right. The earliest memory I have of perfectionism begins in a small classroom. It was lunchtime and all the young students were buzzing around, retrieving lunch boxes, and causing typical first grade chaos. I, however, was not among the students eating lunch, nor the students swinging from the monkey bars. I was in the back of the classroom, hiding under a table with a small notebook clutched to my chest. Now you might automatically assume I was nervous, or didn't have many friends, or just plain weird, and sure, those things could have been true. But really, this picture can be described as the sad, yet familiar story of a budding perfectionist. You see, earlier that morning, my class had taken a spelling test. Spelling was one of my favorite subjects, and I'd always been filled with pride over the 9s and 10s out of 10 scrawled in red pen at the end of the day. The thumbs up from my teacher or a hug from my mom further solidified this feeling of achievement. On this particular day, however, the ugly 5 resting on my paper made my heart sink in my chest. So, I grabbed my notebook and ducked under the table to fix all of my mistakes before the teacher noticed. I needed to be right. I needed to keep up my good grade streak. I needed perfection, and at the time, I didn't even know why. When reflecting back on this particular memory, I began to wonder, am I the only one who feels this way? For any of you wondering the same thing, the answer is an emphatic no. In fact, as students continue through the school system, these perfectionist ideals only become stronger, more pervasive, and more deeply ingrained into our minds. In order to find out where these perfectionist tendencies come from, one first needs to ask this very basic question. Why do we go to school? You'd hope that the answer would be simply to learn. However, from their inception, schools have had a very different purpose. Since their creation, there have been many influences on the present-day American school system, including those by Thomas Jefferson, Horace Mann, and Abraham Lincoln. However, at its core, the basis is the Prussian model of education from the 1820s, described as a system deliberately designed to produce mediocre intellects, to hamstring the inner life, to deny students appreciable leadership skills, and to ensure docile and incomplete citizens, all in order to render the populace manageable. Quite the mouthful. In simpler terms, what's being said is that schools under this model are specifically designed to be human conveyor belts, a way to keep society tidy and convenient for those in power by crushing diverging thought and placing individuals on a carefully crafted path. You have to get good grades, to get into a good college, to get a good job, to have a good life. We as students are given this spiel again and again, and often to the point where only one word truly registers. Grades. There have been many studies regarding the efficacy of our current grading system, and almost all of them have come to the same conclusion. It's just not working. If we take just a moment to think critically about grades, it becomes clear how little sense they make. For example, what does an A really mean? What does it say about the specific skills a student has learned? What does it say about their effort? Or consider the idea of averaging grades throughout a school year. This system implies that an A in the first month of a school year should have the exact same value as an A in the last week of a school year. By definition, that would overlook any sense of progress or cumulative learning throughout the course. In truth, grades are not as constructive as the world seems to think. We've created a grading system in schools that answers one entirely unhelpful question. On a scale from 0 to 100, how bad are you? Are you 1 point bad? 30 points bad? The system itself is designed to show deficiency, designed to make you feel inadequate, Yet we continually dress this system up in the lie that a grade shows how good you are for at least 12 years of a person's life. Our oversimplified grading system has reduced learning to a checkbox activity, a performance for students to put on, where instead of the question being, what did I learn or what interested me, it becomes, is this going to be on the test? The dark truth of this system is that the only thing grades teach students is how to get good grades, how to put on the right performance to attain a desirable grade. Grades remove the curiosity and love for learning that could be cultivated in schools. Students are significantly less likely to take healthy risks or to seek out challenges because failure could mean a bad grade, and what perfectionist could ever deal with a bad grade? This problem is so deeply woven into the school system that it may feel hopeless to try to change it. I could stand up here in front of all of you and say that our education system needs an overhaul, and that would be true, but it would also be unrealistic. However, that does not mean there's nothing we can do. Parents, teachers, and even we, the students, are parts of the cycle of perfectionism in schools. Though a scary thought, there is a silver lining. If we're part of the problem, we also hold the power to be parts of a solution. A few weeks ago, my 13-year-old sister came home from school, visibly upset, and when I asked her what was wrong, she responded that she'd gotten a math test back that day and had received what she considered to be a bad grade. The question is, though, a bad grade by what standards? Often, we as students make grades into a competition. Teachers tell us not to compare, but they don't always see the logic behind our actions. Without the context of how everyone else did, grades don't mean nearly enough. Even an A- can feel bad if everyone else got an A+. So, my challenge to students is to think of grades as avenues to strive for personal bests, not first place. If we can think of grades as feedback, as benchmarks, we can take a step closer to answering that original question the right way. We should go to school to learn, and to learn to love learning itself. While comforting my sister over that very same grade, she asked a question. She said something that made me wonder. She said something that gave me pause. She said it's less about the actual grade. Really, it's what my teacher said afterwards. You are going to be the most disappointed of them all. Though at first I was shocked, I began to realize this is no isolated event. Many teachers use grades and disappointment as weapons to encourage students, but encouragement should be the hand that helps you up when you're down, not the finger that points out where you went wrong. Teachers, you have the power to shape your students. Don't put it off on someone else. Don't ignore it. Use it. Be intentional with your students. Even the simplest of hesitations or facial expressions can make a student feel like a disappointment. Students need to be reminded that their value does not come from a letter grade, nor the approval of their teachers, and especially not from being perfect. They say, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. The same goes for learning. If we can teach students to care more about learning than grades, we can change the entire trajectory of their lives. Learning is a skill that can be used throughout one's entire life. Getting A's is not. I really did save the best, or rather the most complicated, for last, the parents. The way that parents play into their children's perfectionist tendencies is different from the others, because it's on a case-by-case basis. Some parents give their children an expectation when it comes to grades and have punishments when those expectations are not met. Other parents are completely unaware of the ways in which they perpetuate the cycle because it is subconscious. I only have 10 minutes, so it isn't possible to go into the psychology of why parents care so much about their children's grades. But what I will say is this. A parent's disappointment, when used as ammunition, can have impacts even more detrimental than that of a teacher. I can remember in my own experience proudly bringing home high grades in search of the pride-filled hugs and high fives. On other days, though, when bringing home lower grades, the majority of students can recall the sense of dread that comes from receiving a disappointed frown or asked a question like, what happened there? These may not seem like terrible crimes when it comes to the parenting of students, and I'm not saying positive reinforcement is necessarily a bad thing. But I am saying, be aware of what exactly it is you're reinforcing. There's not much difference in a child's mind between a parent's pride or disappointment over a grade to their pride or disappointment in the child themselves. So, be intentional with your children, because they do not take your words lightly. Simply by actively appreciating effort and being a solid platform for their self-esteem, you can create an understanding in your child that they are not defined by their grades, whether they be zeros or 100s. So, I've stood up here for quite a while now and filled your heads with all of this knowledge about perfectionism and the grading system, but it doesn't mean a thing if I myself have not grown at all from the little first grader, afraid of the 5 out of 10 written on her spelling test. The title of this talk is not How I Overcame Perfectionism, nor is it I'm done caring about grades, and there's a reason for that, the past tense. I'm still on what some may call the recovering perfectionist path. Perfectionism has controlled me my whole life, and I, for one, am tired of it. Constantly appealing to what teachers want, learning only what's necessary in order to get the grade. There isn't a single aspect of my experience that hasn't been touched by this internalized need for perfect. And in order to be perfect, you have to be compliant. Compliant to all of the standards we're constantly told we need to live up to. Do we really want to live in a world where the end goal is compliance? To elementary schoolers, we say sit still. To middle schoolers, it's be quiet. And to high schoolers, again and again, we say don't be unruly, don't make waves. Our current grading system sends the very same message, just in the form of a single letter. And that is why all of this matters. Because that message we're sending, it goes deeper than a report card, deeper than one offhand comment from a parent or teacher. It seeps into every area of a student's life, every area of my life. Throughout the research and slightly painful soul search that preceded this talk, I've learned many things, both about myself and about our current grading system. But the most important thing I've learned is this. Perfectionism is not a character flaw to be fixed. It's a school subject we need to stop teaching. It's time for students to be able to look at themselves, regardless of the letters on their report card, and say, I know my worth, and it's not a number from 0 to 100. Thank you.